welcome to week 3 of Jesus and Our Calling on the Road to Easter. My name is Gemma. I am the rector of Cove in Farnborough, and we're in one of our churches today in St John's here in Cove. And I'm delighted to be joined by Father Neil.
Hello, I'm Father Neil Roberts. I'm the Area Dean of Guildford, and it's good to be here.
It's great to have you. You had a great time last week, I believe, with Kath and Joy from St Saviour's discussing Mark 8, and today we're in that thought-provoking passage in John 2.
When I read this, I thought of my mood swings.
Tell us more.
Well, you know, we all have those days when the weather's rubbish and the cat's been poorly on the table and, you know, the kids are running around the place and you think, oh, I've not got patience, I've not got time, I've not got da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And so it made me wonder whether, in fact, Jesus was that cross.
Yeah.
Like you and I get cross, or whether, in fact, this was a story with a deeper meaning, a deeper resonance.
Yeah.
And for me, this particular text isn't so much about angry Jesus, and that's okay, therefore, to be angry. I think this is Jesus challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
I think this is about Jesus saying, this is not business as usual, because here they are in the busyness of the temple, the noise, the smell, the bustle, the money changing hands in God's own space. Come into the temple, pay your money, get your temple coin, do your sacrifice, and off you go. And it's business as usual. And I think here Jesus is challenging us to say, the relationship with God is a living relationship. So I think Jesus was probably quite frustrated. You know, it was probably a wet Monday. And he was probably as frustrated as you and I are when we're trying to get the kids out the door to get them to school. But actually, I think he was using that opportunity to say, come on, look at this differently. Don't accept this as it is. Because actually, where you're putting your money is not going to give you a good return. Yeah. This isn't about stones. This is about living relationship. This is about living stones. So that's kind of where I started looking at it. I don't know what you thought.
I almost hear this passage, like when you read it, because you're in the temple, you're right in the centre of Jerusalem. It'd been full of the hustle and bustle. It was the centre of that community. People would be trading, as you say, centre of business. And you can imagine Jesus in the midst of this and then having this response. But for me, what it reminded me of is, I suppose, how sometimes God speaks. And that not so much anger, but that sense of conviction, I suppose. And I grew up in a kind of charismatic evangelical circles, and if God was speaking, it would often be a picture of a waterfall or a butterfly and this beautiful, peaceful thing that God was calling us to. And if I'm honest, that's not been my experience. I mean, not that God hasn't spoken in ways like that. But I remember years ago going forward for prayer at a conference, and somebody was speaking. I can't remember who it was, but it was like a Brother Andrew, Jackie Pullinger type about going to change the world and take risks for Jesus and fight for justice. And I remember going forward for prayer, and I thought that what God would do through that is use me in, really exciting justice building things, and, where you go and you speak to terrorists, or you get to do amazing things for God in different countries and different places. And the reality is, Neil, that it hasn't looked like that. It hasn't looked like I've suddenly got loads of books and doing the speaking circuit. But it has looked like sometimes I get a fire in my belly about something that I know I need to write to someone or to respond or to do something, that like sense of injustice, and then I bring it to the Lord and I pray, Lord, something needs to happen about this. And then he often says, well, Gemma, you could do something about that. A lot of the time it's like, actually, it starts with a sense of something here needs to be done to bring this back on track to God, or how it should be in his kingdom. Sometimes I wonder if when we get frustrated with something, is actually God speaking to us through that?
One much greater theologian than I once wrote, nothing's lost in God's economy.
Yeah.
And so even in those emotions where we in our modern era want to close them down, quiet them off, actually God is in the midst of that. It reminds me of when Jesus was calming the waters on the storm of the lake. He rebukes the anger, he rebukes the storm, but he deploys it to make a point. You know, only because of the storm, only because of Good Friday do we get Easter Sunday. Only because of the storm do we get the opportunity to ask Jesus in and to say, be with us.
Yeah.
Be with us. So, yeah, I think, God is in the midst of all of those difficult times. And you think, I can't do this. And the answer is yes, you can. I don't know whether you're aware of, or have seen a copy, you probably have, of the New Zealand Book of Common Prayer. And I think it's in that. It says at the end of the Mass, at the end of the Eucharist, our service is ended, our service must now begin.
Yeah.
So it's that handing over. What are you going to do with it? You've got the hands, you've got the feet of Jesus Christ now.
Yeah.
Go and be Christ for the sake of the world. So I think that's right. And actually deploying your anger as enthusiasm and zealousness.
Yeah.
That's a vocation prompt in a way.
Yeah.
What can you do that challenges all the things that, you turn the TV on and you see and you think, that's not right, that's not right. What does God say into that? Sometimes that has to be us.
Thinking of the endings of the service on a Sunday, we say, don't we, go in peace to love and serve the Lord. And that's what we're asking. We're going in peace, and we're going from that place of wanting to serve and maybe joy to serve. But sometimes the motivation to get there might have been... So, had that not been the case, many Christian charities would never have been started because no one would have thought we need to address this injustice in the world. Yeah, I think God works in that way more than probably be given credit for.
Promptings, even in those dark moments of despair that people don't want to in polite society talk about, like dying and loss and grief. They're the moments where we call upon God the most. But you are bringing God into the centre of their world, and that's what vocation is, isn't it? It's about keeping the rumour of God alive, bringing God back into the centre of what we're about. I think that's what he was trying to do. I think that's what we're called to do, whatever our vocation and ministry. But it's always challenging. But I think that's the point of vocation, that it's not a single moment.
No.
It's that ongoing process of being shaped into the likeness of Christ.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. I'm a Benedictine by vow, and we are daily reminded of our mortality. And that's not some kind of morose kind of looking at the end of life, but it's actually about saying, what have you done with your day to day? How can you reflect on it? What is God doing? Where is God leading you into? Whether that's Cove or Guildford or anywhere else. And I think that's that business as usual challenge again, that actually don't invest in the for now, invest in the forever.
As a priest, the place I want to wear my clerical collar is the supermarket, is the walking around the community, is the coffee shop, because that's a place that we bring hope, we bring something that's different, and where we get to have those conversations with people. And to me, that reminds me of my vocation, actually, when you're at any coffee shop, I won't mention any particular brand, when you're at the till of any coffee shop and you get to have that conversation. For me, often, they'll regularly say, oh, are you a priest? I'm like, yes, I am. And you're able to have that. This is about being God's presence in the world, taking the story of Jesus into the places that we take ourselves.
And that challenge of business as usual is actually a challenge of what most people would say in the high street would be, is this it?
Yes.
Is this all there is?
Yeah.
And vocation calls you up and out and says, actually, there is more to life than this.
Yeah.
That we are called to have life in all its fullness, and that means to be the glory of God in the world.
Yeah.
And that's not the role of the priest. That's the role of all people and the priesthood of all believers, actually, to offer to God that worship in the way that we live. And that challenge is, I think, going back to where we were, what Jesus is doing. He's turning tables, but he's also turning hearts. And I think this is that second thing in that reading that he talks about. It's in the temple. This is God HQ.
Yeah.
And he turns the tables. And he looks at the stones and he says, this will be turned to the ground. This is going to be rubble.
Yeah.
But the real temple is here in the person of Christ. There's that challenge not to be stone-like. The challenge not to be, well, here I am and this is it, because this is not all there is. Vocation asks us about where God is leading us onto. And sometimes it's not very comfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes actually we're quite happy being the stones. We're quite happy doing the business as usual. Don't disturb me, Lord. And that's the point where he prompts you the most. And that's perhaps why we get cross. because God is calling us to change and to challenge and to move on. And actually, we want to be the stones in the temple. And we're quite happy, thank you very much. And God says, you could be more. And that's, for me as a Catholic in the Church of England, that's why the sacraments are so important.
Yeah.
Because they bring us back to God. And that's, again, about putting the stones down and having that relationship. Stop with the transactional. Stop with the mechanical. See it as a living relationship.
I find this idea of being, particularly from my background, this idea of being a temple of the Holy Spirit. Like God is living in us. Jesus has rebuilt the temple, and we meet God in Him, but people meet God through us and His Spirit living in us. And actually, wherever we are, God's Spirit it is there through us, and people should connect with us and see something of God, which is an amazing privilege and a little bit of pressure at times. I think that sense of I'm God's representative in this place, and that's true for all of us, not just us as priests. That's true for anyone who's part of God's people. And just the thing that's something that's living is it's that life and freshness, and what you talk about from the sacraments, and that connection of God. How are you connecting with me today? Where can I meet you today? What can I be done? What can I do in your kingdom today? And taking that moment when we get up and we open the front door, whether we go into the office or we go into the room next door, even our home office, or we go to the school gate or wherever, saying, Lord, I want to be someone who is your hands and feet today. I want to be where people maybe not physically walking up to a church, they are seeing the temple of the Holy Spirit within me. How can I be used to build your kingdom in whatever way that is?
That's both a blessing and a shadow, because you've got to bear the weight. I'm always reminded of that beautiful line when the bishop licenses and inducts and collates you.
Yeah.
The cure of souls, which is both yours and mine.
Yeah.
And that sharing of that apostolic responsibility. Yeah. And that's what vocation is. It's about sharing in the life of the church for the sake of the world. We're not here for the sake of the church.
Yeah, that was the thing that that I felt called to ordination, that whole line. I remember I'd resisted ordination for years. Everyone else knew that I was going to get ordained before I did, as often that is the case. No. And I remember one of my big things was, I feel called to church leadership, but does it have to be the Church of England? That was my question. I was doing my master's, I was sat in a lecture, and we're looking at the history of the church in England. So we had now Bishop Graham Tomlin come and speak, and he just went through the parish system and just the missiology behind the parish system, and that sense that every single person in this country has a priest that has a responsibility and an opportunity to pray for them, to speak into their lives. And I remember leaving that lecture and having a conversation with someone going, wow, the Church of England is amazing. This mission strategy that they have, where every person in this country is accounted for and prayed for, has a priest that can look after them. And I remember turning to someone and saying, it just hit me, and I was working for an Anglican church at the time, of like, oh, that's my main reason to not get ordained. Then thought, okay, maybe I do need to start exploring this. And there's something about that cure of souls, that kind of, and this, the essence of who we are. Actually, not just responsibility for who walks through the door, but who doesn't walk through the door.
One of my favourite people of all time, William Temple, Archbishop of Canterbury, who very famously writes, the church exists for the benefit of its non-members. Yeah. And that's the vocation. That's the calling. That's the privilege, but it's also the challenge. Yeah. And we're called to be the living stones. It doesn't matter which building you've got and how you worship. What it's about is that living relationship with a living God who in Jesus Christ comes to us and says, I know how you feel. Yeah. That full gambit of humanity is within God in that person of Jesus.
And also in our society, where to know that God cares about the stuff that we feel is an injustice. I'm sure God's heart is pretty annoyed about pollution in this planet as much as anyone else's.
Absolutely.
And to know that the things that we see that's wrong in the world, that the questions that we're asking, because we're all made in God's image, so the questions that we're saying, this isn't right, actually God sees that isn't right. And that this passage reminds us God does care, and he wants us as his people to respond to that. And actually it's on his heart the things that break our hearts as well.
That wonderful line that we use to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God, but it's an active verb. Yeah. You've got to do justice. Justice doesn't just happen. No. We bring it about by the nature of our vocation, our ministry, our calling, our being.
Yeah.
and what we do as a result of that. I think that's the exciting thing, really.
Well, Neil, it's been great chatting to you today and just pulling apart this passage and seeing a little bit further. It's now your turn to have a look at some of the questions as well. I think they're going to be coming up on the screen, so you'll be able to see what to discuss a bit further.
And when you've done that, if there is a call somewhere in your heart, think about how you might explore that. Maybe talk to your church leadership. Could you read the intercessions? Could you read the lesson? Could you be more active in your witness to Jesus Christ in the worshiping community to which you are called? You might want to look at the foundation course. You might want to look at all manner of opportunities. And there is, I think, as I speak, as if by magic, a QR code somewhere. And you could have a look at that, scan that into your device, and that will take you somewhere important. Wherever you go, whatever you do, God is in it, God is with you, and be assured of our prayers, and go well.